Hey everybody, it's Dick here. The other day, Fannie and I found ourselves in West London at lunchtime together, and we decided to patronize one of the new restaurants that happened to open up in Ealing despite the pandemic. There used to be a restaurant that was more form than function, more glitz over substance, in this little strip of businesses and offices in Ealing called Lime Yard or Limehouse Yard. I don't know. Lime Yard. Something. Anyway, whatever it was pretty dismal. The food was awful. The service was awful. It was not an enjoyable eating experience. It was on the tail end of the dining out renaissance that London had experienced starting in around 2010, leading up to the Olympics and kind of limping along until the pandemic. And early on in that renaissance, there were all of these restaurants, these stylish restaurants that opened up with pallet wood and raw brick walls and plumbing fittings as guardrails and table dividers, the bathrooms metro tiled, and it was all very stylish. And unfortunately, the majority of these places, the food did not match the effort that was put into the interior design. And Lime Yard was a victim of one of these places where it looked the part. And unfortunately, if they had put half the effort that they put into the interior design, into the quality of the food and the menu and the service, they'd probably still be in business. But it went out of business, and I'm sure it blamed COVID for going out of business. But even if COVID didn't happen, it was gonna go out of business. And a new restaurant popped in, and it's called Bread Street. Well, we're gonna drive by it. I'm in West London, I'm in Ealing today, so we're gonna drive by it. We'll find out exactly what it's called. We were encouraged by the news that a restaurant had filled in that space, because it's always good to have some variety of places. And we were happy to see that Lime Yard was gone because of how poor an experience we had there. Bread Street Cafe? Bread Street? I don't know, we'll get down there. It's something stupid. Well, we popped in, and after we arrived, we realized it was a Gordon Ramsay venture. And I have mixed feelings about Mr. Ramsay. I think generally I'm a fan of his television programming. He licenses his name to a nice set of plates that Royal Dalton has produced in the consumer pricing range. So cheap consumer priced plates with Gordon Ramsay's name on. So the style is kind of nice. Maybe I like his team more than I like him, but I'm entertained by the foul-mouthed chef most of the time. In the past, we've eaten at Claridge's when he ran the restaurant at Claridge's, and we ate at his restaurant Maze, which I think was down in Mayfair. It wasn't far from Claridge's. Is that Mayfair? When we ate at those places, we were able to witness his contempt for vegetarians, of which I am one, for going on 3 decades now. And it was such a problem at Maze, which was a tasting menu anyway, so you're not going to get a lot of food anyway. It was such a hubbub to ask for a vegetarian selection that they actually had to wait for Mr. Ramsay himself to come over from Claridge's and create a dish for me. So the rest of my table of clients and VIPs and important people that Fannie and I were trying to impress had to wait for their meals so that I could get my slice of raw eggplant or whatever the fuck, onion sprout or whatever the hell. I don't even remember. It was so disappointing. Now, as a vegetarian, I'm used to being disappointed, and I always have the it's only one meal policy. But if the only one meal costs me 70 quid for some weeds, I usually look forward to the dessert, and the dessert wasn't any better. Here we are. Okay, we're coming up to this place, this Bread Street Kitchen or something. We'll see. We'll see. Bread Street Cafe. The Bread Street Cafe. There you go. Bread Street Cafe. Nice ivory off-white eggshell front. Understated sans serif. Says Gordon Ramsay on the awning. There it is. Bread Street Cafe. First of all, what the hell is Bread Street? I'm sure it's trying to hark back to all of the streets that were named for the trades that they were on, and maybe the first Bread Street Cafe was opened on Bread Street, if there is such a Bread Street. What a pretentious fucking name, Bread Street Cafe. So we went inside, optimistic. Fannie's a Gordon Ramsay fan. Fannie liked her meal at May's, her slate of raw meat and foie gras or whatever it was at May's. She went to Claridge's all the time with clients. We looked at the menu before we went in. His vegetarian contempt continues, but I saw a couple of sides that might work, and I wasn't very hungry to begin with, and I wanted to make Fannie happy, so I swallowed my own preferences and went inside with cautious optimism. The place was empty. I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday that we went in. It was lunchtime. It was well into lunchtime, and the place was empty. And the hostess asked us if we had a reservation. I looked at the empty place and said, "No. Are you very busy today?" And she said, "Oh, I just wanted to make sure if you had a reservation that we marked it off." And I said, surely if I had a reservation, when I arrived I would say, "I have a reservation. Reservation for Whistles." No, the question I asked when we arrived is, "Do you have room for two?" In response to, "Do you have room for two?" she asked, "Do you have a reservation?" Which means that as a policy, she is meant to ask every person who walks into this cafe if they have a reservation. Another pretentious act. Trying to build up import for a service. We were seated. We sat there for a good 10 minutes before we were offered water. We looked at the menu. Fannie realized there wasn't a lot on offer for me, asked over and over if I wanted to stay. I insisted that we would stay. We ordered, and then we proceeded to wait 45 minutes for our appetizer, which were these flame-grilled, char-grilled peppers. Now, despite the bad impressions I was getting, the char-grilled peppers were delicious, and they were freshly made char-grilled peppers. So the chef put them on the grill, and we were waiting for them to be grilled, and they came out piping hot. It's not that they were grilled in some factory somewhere and then heated up. They were grilled to order. So things were looking up at the Bread Street Cafe. We had just opted for tap water because the cocktails and the, what do they call, mixologist at the bar looked too expensive to us, so we were just going with tap water. We had one glass of tap water that we had when we sat down, and we were not offered another glass of tap water for at least 45 minutes. We had the empty plate of the appetizers and empty glasses which we had slid to the end of the table, and we counted the number of times both the waitress and the maitre d', or the hostess, came by, and they didn't even look at our table to ask if we wanted more water. So we were just sitting there, parched, with our mouths kind of charred from the charred peppers. Miata. So we waited and we waited and we waited. Fannie had ordered the meatball sub with some sort of signature meatball, and I ordered the baked pasta dish. Pasta is really the only vegetarian meal other than salads that people who don't know how to cook for vegetarians offer. They were expensive. I think the sandwich was 12 or 15 pounds and my dish was 16 or 17 pounds. We got some cold chips, and when the food finally came, we had to ask for our food. It was about 45-50 minutes. We had been there about an hour, and we had to ask for our food. Fannie's sandwich was uninspiring, but my plate was burnt. It was burnt because it was a baked dish. They put the stuffed pasta tube with cheese, they smother it in some sort of sauce, and then they put it in the oven to bake. The trick about making a dish like that is you have to undercook the pasta because it's going to continue to cook in the sauce while it's baking. Now, they managed to undercook the pasta so much that even while the dish was burnt, the pasta was still undercooked. I was biting my tongue, and I was just happy for Fannie to finish her meal so that we could pay and leave, but I wasn't going to eat what I was offered. Finally, they came to ask me how it was, and I couldn't bite my lip. I just had to say I didn't like it. It was not cooked well. Even if it was cooked well, the flavor would have been boring. It was not the quality that I expected for both the cost of the dish and all the pretense and bullshit that I had to endure waiting for it. And it reminded me of those shitty dishes that Gordon himself would lambast in some sort of New Jersey Hell's Kitchen episode, and then go in and start banging heads. I said I didn't want to eat it. They said, do you want anything else? I said, it was a struggle finding this off of the menu. I don't want to wait for them to cook something else. I want my wife to finish what she has, and I want to leave. We've been waiting around for glasses of water, and it just the service and the quality of the food did not meet our expectations. So then they sent over this woman who I had noticed floating around the place. She was sitting behind a laptop in one of the smaller tables in a corner by the bar. She was dressed to the nines in a suit. She looked like an Italian executive out of some sort of movie. Thick-rimmed, winged, cat-like glasses, dressed to the nines. Hair done impeccably, looking down at the end of her nose through her glasses over the top of her laptop to see that everything was in order. Obviously the manager. She comes over and crouches down next to our table and says, I hear that you're not satisfied with your meal, she says. Can I ask why? Well, I just explained to both the waitress and the hostess why. So I went on to say, this is why. And by the way, while you're seeing everything happening around you as if it's all going in order, you've watched your employees walk by our table and not offer us water or ask how things are. Now, what I had forgotten to mention that when we came in, there were two builder blokes sitting in the booth by the window. And they were listening to their phones, both on different videos, as loud as they possibly could. We were so annoyed, one, by the volume of the music and the speaker that was blaring over our head, that we were going to ask to have turned down. We decided not to ask to turn down the volume of the music because it was doing a reasonably good job at drowning out the videos of the builder blokes in the corner. Finally, it got so much that I said to our waitress, I'm struggling to decide whether I'm going to go over and say something to those gentlemen about the volume of their phones or whether I'm going to ask you to do it. So then, instead of going over and telling the blokes to turn off their phones, she went and conferred with the hostess, who both looked over in the corner, then looked at us, and then decided they weren't going to say anything. Now, mind you, Fannie was facing the window where the blokes were sitting, and she noticed that they had ordered a shitload of food. One guy got the Wellington. They had all of these sides, a couple of drinks, and then while we were waiting for our food, for the dog's age that it was, there was a commotion over by the window between the hostess and the waitress, and then the Italian bird. The blokes had skipped out on their check. They had dined and dashed. Fast forward to when the Italian bird was coming and talking to us about our meal. Fannie was so frustrated that she asked to have her meatball sub wrapped to go because she wasn't going to eat while I was sitting there eating nothing. The manager did take the high road and told us that we didn't have to pay for our meal. Not that I was going to anyway. And even if I had the inclination to, I don't think Fannie would have let us. We left there with the wrapped sandwich, and we walked up the street to Santa Maria, which is a local brick oven pizza place. The place was empty because we were now after the lunch rush. We were seated by a very cheery woman who didn't ask us if we had reservations. We had drinks on our table within a minute of us sitting down and asking for water. The water was refilled twice. We ordered 2 pizzas and a eggplant melanzane, and that was delivered to our table within 10 minutes if it took that long. The food was cooked fresh to order, it was hot, it was delicious, and we were out of the place in about 25 minutes flat. Food is very important. You should not put something in your mouth that wastes your time and money. Food is an experience. Yes, it's nourishment. People say sometimes you can't avoid but eat crap, but I'd rather not eat than eat crap, unless I were starving. The moral of the story is that you can't make a plate of food by committee. I can imagine the trickle-down effect that led to my plate of fucking garbage. The marketing executives, the tasters, the approvals, the blah, 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 blah. When around the corner, these people are running their own business and they're making 90-second brick oven pizzas. I think the trick about finding a restaurant, there's a balance, because you can get an independent place that could give a shit. You can get one of these cafes. Cafes, such a British thing. These cafes that are run by literally the guy making the sandwich is the guy who's paying the rent. And it sucks. It's shit. And then you can eat at the Bread Street Cafe, and the guy whose name is on the awning and the guy whose company or shell organization or shell company is paying the rent will never be in that establishment. And then you're also eating shit. Or you go around the corner of Santa Maria, and maybe the manager isn't the owner, but the owner pops in and has a steak and a passion. And the punchline to it all was Fannie was carrying around all afternoon the tinfoil wrapped half of meatball sub that they sent her off with from the Bread Street Cafe. We went to heat it up later for a snack, and I thought I'd dress it up a little bit with a bit of cheese and maybe a bit more seasoning. And when I opened the roll to dress it up, there was one testicle-sized meatball mashed into the bread, right in the middle. And that was half of the sandwich. So the other half of the sandwich only had one meatball as well. So for an 11-pound sandwich, you got 2 meatballs? So if you find yourself in West London and you're looking for a place to eat, skip the Bread Street Cafe. Gordon doesn't need your money anyway. If you like that video and you want to see more like them, hit like, share, and subscribe.